Good morning, and thank you for the invitation and for the very inspiring 2 days so far. My name is Lieven from BLAF Architecten. I will speak about a very small project, a house, a very small brick house in the outskirts of Brussels, in a very strange place. We sometimes call it non-text instead of context. Actually the story about this brick house, it starts with a timber frame. So there's before, there is the DNA house, and there is after in our practice. So for us it was a key project where construction actually means has a big role. So we were fascinated after leaving school. We became fascinated by passive house construction, actually. So timber frame construction and hybrid wall compositions. It was nothing like what we learned in school. So we had to change our whole idea of construction. We had to teach ourselves how to construct, how to make a hole in a wall, and how to put a window in a hole in a wall. It's simple stuff like that. So I will quickly run you through some of these projects because there's many of them, and they all have very specific search for constructive aspects, wall compositions, and facade claddings. It's always a story about how to organize the construction site, about how the construction works together with the geometry of a floor plan, how the big amounts of insulation that we put on the outside of a building influences the choice of the facade cladding, etc. We had to learn how to integrate a sunscreen in a facade. Very trivial stuff that was new. Nobody knew how to integrate a sunscreen in a facade. So each one of these houses, this one is in liquid rubber facade. Each one of these houses has a different story. But strangely enough, there was never brick involved. This is an overview of all the wall compositions that we tested, that we explored between, let's say, in a span of 10 years. So each one of these wall compositions was constructed in one of our houses, and some went bad, and some were good, and some we had to alter and do them over again and try and make it better. So it's actually this whole exploration of trying to make a wall composition that is executable. While we were diving into this this thing with a passive house construction, we found we're convinced actually that 90% of the houses that are built in Belgium doesn't reach the energy performance that it was calculated for because of bad execution. So this means that construction is not only about imposing an idea, about an architect imposing an idea on the construction or on space or how it's made, but it's also about connecting with the people who have to execute this on site. So we spend a lot of time on site talking about what is executable, what is not executable, what is doable, what is cheap, what is expensive, etc. This was very important for us at a certain moment. This book was released in Brussels, celebrating the first 15 years of passive house construction in the Brussels region. There is not one building in this book with brick facade. So for us it was, we are a brick country, Belgium, so for us it was not like a problem in terms of we want to be conservative and make sure that everybody keeps constructing in brick. But it was an interesting problem to realize that there's a shift in the position of the architect when it comes to the design of a facade of a building. This means that you're no longer this cladding and dressing is a different position for an architect than the brick construction as we knew it, with massive and constructive tectonics, so to say. Of course, we try to find out what's the reason that there's not so much brick involved. This is what the industry told us to do. If we need more insulation, you make thinner bricks. This is actually what happened in a span of 10 years. This is what, let's say 90% of the houses, single-family homes in Belgium are built like, the cavity wall construction. And this is what it should be if you want to have a decent passive house wall composition. So of course, trying to keep the outer wall of the cavity construction, keeping it connected, and you need a lot of anchors and secondary constructions. It's expensive. It's messy. It's hard to do it right. There's gaps in the isolation, in the insulation, etc. So at the same time, we've also been inspired by colleagues. This is an example of the Veeldervink Tailleux, who made a really strong poetic gesture in one of their key projects, where they had to clad a beautiful brick wall because of insulation and energy performance. And what they did is they drew a pattern on the slates. They drew the pattern of a brick wall. So for us it was like this longing for brick and for matter and for materiality in the appearance, in the image of architecture. Around that time, two interesting books appeared or were released, one by Jan-Peter Wingender, one by Koen Mulder, which also in Belgium put brick construction back in the attention of a lot of architects. So, and we learned a lot of things about brick by doing home renovations. So we were very often inspired by old brick constructions, and we were very often challenged by how to refurbish them. So very often we worked with box inside the box constructions, with timber frame constructions inside brick shells to make new spaces. And this is also a very fascinating image that says something about the durability, like the long-term image that you have in brick construction. Belgium is a country where people spend a lot of money on their private house. It's like an investment for generations. It has to do with ownership, and it has to do with a lot of fiscality and stuff in our country. But this idea of the ruin, maybe waiting to be refurbished, it was for us a very inspiring image. So back to the house. First, what we did was, of course, find the orientation and find how it should sit on the plot. And we decided to make this shell, a brick wall in the form of a cross, in a thick, massive wall construction, like let's say pre-cavity wall period wall construction with solid 1 stone thick walls. And what you see is that on the inside, the purpose was to make a flat surface on the inside with all the structural elements that we had to add to keep the brick construction together, to not make it fall apart. You can see columns and beams, ring beams. And they are usually articulated on the inside of construction to make sure that the facade is flat and even and nice and smooth. But in this case, we decided to do it the other way, to make the inside smooth. Just to make sure that in a second movement, we could put the installation in a very efficient way and the timber frame construction in a very efficient way. Like this. So that's what happens if you look at the elevation drawings. All the articulations that you see, like the horizontal and vertical structural articulations, are just the result of construction elements that were pushed to the outside to keep the inside surface really flat, like this. So for us, it was about rediscovering, for instance, what a cornice of a building is. It's like two stones cantilevering out to make sure that the brickwork can be the formwork for a ring beam that holds the whole building together, and it makes the cornice. So it became very simple and evident and very basic and essential in a way, the building. That was the first step. Second step was it's just a house. We put a house into the shell. So it's a very light timber frame structure. And the idea was that it could be there for 2 or 3 generations and then be scooped out and go back to the ruin situation and then refurbish it with another home for another family or for someone else. So we made this idea about the hardware of the building and like the software on the inside. These are the plans. It's just a house, like I said. Working with the timber frame. Timber frame has logical spans. These logical spans, they define rooms. Rooms form enfilades, etc., like that. And this is what happens if you look from the inside to the house, to the patio. So we didn't fill the whole cross shape with the house. We left some expansion space, like that. So taking this principle of the self-bearing brick wall as a facade for a building, taking it to a more urban context and taking it to a bigger scale, we realized that the old way of constructing this one, the classic full stone wall, it's quite expensive because there's a lot of bricklaying involved, and labor now is much more expensive than materials. It used to be the other way around, of course. But there's too many bricks in this type of wall to make it economic. So no wonder that someone came up with the idea of the half-stone facade, outside cavity facade, with a simple stretcher bond. So we thought if we can make thicker bricks on the same principle, it can be self-bearing again. So we can do the same construction as the DNA house, but we can do it with half the amount of bricks. So that would be economical. And if we make it even thicker, like 30 centimeters, we have enough space to put 2 balcony plates, concrete plates, on top of it. So we have 2 times 15 centimeter. So you can make balcony structures, freestanding, cold standing structures with very simple brickwork, with a very economic brickwork. So we developed this brick together with a very small manufacturer in Belgium. Actually, the whole production of this brick has a span of 100 meters between gaining the clay from the soil and the finished product. So it's a big brick. We call it the big brick. This is the mock-up of the balcony structure that we built in Ghent on the project. And this is the brick building just in front. Our big brick is compatible with normal format of brick, which has 9 centimeter of thickness. So we can use both mixed. We can go from normal facade to big brick facade. And it shows like this. It's close to delivery, so we're very proud of this experiment as a next step. At the same time, we're trying to make a set of pilot houses where we are testing the big brick for in different wall compositions. So that's it for the projects. What I tried to do is maybe as a last thought about construction. What I try to do with my students is work on this theme called Brick Wall City. It's always about brickwork, what I do with my students. But actually Brick Wall City is about material, construction, and the image of architecture. And for brick, of course, it's a brick wall city. I think the construction, the wall, is in the middle. It's like the connector between the material and the image, which is the city. So I think architecture has something to do with the interconnection between these 3 aspects of constructing, of building, and always should have all 3 of them. I think architecture should be informed by material, it should be, urban design should be informed by construction, etc. So as a final thought on construction, thank you.